It was almost midnight. The wind rattled against the windows, and every creak of the house felt like a warning. I tucked my son into bed, pulled the blanket up to his neck, and he looked at me with those big, frightened eyes. "Daddy," he said, trembling. "Can you check if there are monsters under my bed?" I smiled, tried to stay calm. "Monsters, huh?" I said. "Let's see who's hiding down there." I knelt down, and lifted the cover. That's when I saw it. Under the bed was my son, the same face, the same eyes, but he was shaking and whispered, pale and terrified, "Daddy, there's someone on my bed." For a moment, I froze. I looked up and the one lying on the bed was staring back at me. The eyes were black, lifeless, empty, and then it smiled, slowly, like it was pretending to be human. "Good night, Daddy," the thing said, in a raspy, distorted voice. I stepped back. The lamp flickered, the light trembling like a dying candle. I looked again under the bed. Empty. Nothing, no sun, no shadow, no breath. I turned to the bed, and now, that thing was sitting up, watching me. Its head tilted slightly to the side, the smile still growing. "He's asleep now, Daddy," the creature whispered. "Now it's your turn." Everything went dark. I couldn't see anything, but I felt it, a cold hand wrapping around my wrist. "He's under your bed now." I'm your dream companion, the one who helps you unwind after a long, busy day. Before you drift off to sleep, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from right now? What time is it there? Now take a deep breath, get comfortable in bed, and come with me because the night is just beginning, and this story is all yours. I was having a pleasant dream. A green field stretched endlessly around me, under a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. I could hear laughter, mine, light and carefree. I hadn't laughed like that in years. For a moment, I felt free, weightless, alive. Then came the first sound. It was faint at first, a slow, dull thud, somewhere far away. Then another, and another. I thought it was part of the dream, someone hammering something in the distance. But with each hit, the sound grew louder, closer, real. The laughter stopped. The sky dimmed. The grass beneath my feet faded to black, and I felt a drop of cold sweat slide down my neck. And then, darkness. I opened my eyes, gasping for air. I was awake, or I thought I was, but I couldn't see anything. Nothing. Just pure, endless black. I reached up instinctively, and my forehead struck something hard, wet, cold, rough wood, just inches from my face. My chest tightened. I tried to move, but my shoulders hit the sides. My knees hit the bottom. My breath bounced back at me, shallow and fast. The air was thick, heavy, unmoving. I realized where I was, inside a box. No, inside a coffin. My mind screamed, "This can't be real. It's just a dream." But I could feel the splinters digging into my skin. The pressure of the wood, the smell, old, damp, mixed with something metallic. I started to bang my fists against the lid. "Help! Somebody help me." My own voice sounded muffled, trapped. I hit harder. The sound didn't echo. It died instantly, swallowed by the earth above me. Then, from somewhere beyond the coffin, I heard it. A slow, deliberate, metallic tapping. Someone was hammering. They were sealing it, nailing it shut. Each hit sent a vibration through the wood, through my skull, through my bones. I started to kick and scream until my throat tore, until I could taste blood. But the hammer didn't stop. Thud, stop. "I'm alive," I screamed. "Please, I'm still here." No answer, only the sound of metal meeting wood. I felt tears stream down my face. My fingers clawed at the coffin's lid until my nails split. The wood dug into my palms, but I didn't stop. My chest ached, my lungs burned. I tried to remember the last thing before the dream. The dinner table, the pills, the strange taste of the wine. Had I died? No, I was breathing. I could feel my heart hammering. I was alive, but the hammering continued. And then, silence. Complete silence. I froze. Not even my breath dared to move. I listened. Nothing. For a moment, I thought maybe they'd stopped. Maybe they were digging me out. Then something scratched the lid from the inside. I froze. My own hands were still. I wasn't moving. But something else was. Scratching from above my head. I could feel the wood trembling slightly, like small fingers dragging across it. I whispered, "Who's there?" And then, a whisper came back. ... It was my voice. ... Something pressed gently against the lid. Not a hammer now. A hand, slow, cold, patient. Then I heard nails again, but softer. Inside the coffin. ... Tap, tap, tap. I tried to move, but something held my wrists down. I could feel breath against my ear. Warm, close. A whisper again, so close I could hear the smile in it. "Don't fight it," it said. "We'll rest together now." The air grew colder. My chest stopped moving. The last sound I heard wasn't my scream, but the faint, final strike of the hammer. ... And then, nothing. ... Just dirt. ... Darkness. ... And silence that never ended. The road to my grandmother's house was never supposed to feel haunted. It was a narrow stretch of asphalt winding through tall pines. The kind of place where you could almost hear your own thoughts echoing between the trees. I used to love that silence when I was younger. It felt peaceful, like the world was pausing for a moment just for me. But this time, when I drove down that same road after 10 long years, something felt wrong. The forest looked different. The trees leaned closer, as if whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. Even the air felt heavier, thicker, almost aware of me. My grandmother had died 3 months before, leaving her old Victorian house to me, a place I hadn't visited since I was a child. She'd always been strange, with her obsession for mirrors. Every wall, every corridor, every corner of her home had one. As a boy, I thought it was fascinating. As a man, I found it uncomfortable. When I arrived, the house stood exactly as I remembered. Pale yellow paint faded by time, ivy crawling up the porch rails, and that single attic window staring down like an unblinking eye. The front door opened with the same creak it used to, and the smell hit me instantly. Old wood dust, perfume, the faint trace of something floral that didn't belong to any living person. It was exactly as if she were still there. The mirrors greeted me first, lining the hallway like sentinels. Some were cracked, others spotless. As I walked deeper inside, I caught my reflection dozens of times. Each one slightly distorted a trick of the glass, I thought. But one detail made me stop. In one of the mirrors near the living room, my reflection didn't move in sync. When I tilted my head, it hesitated. When I blinked, it stared back, unblinking. I laughed it off, convincing myself it was exhaustion from the drive, or maybe the light, but I couldn't help feeling like something inside that reflection was waiting for me to notice. I spent the next few hours exploring the house, trying to ground myself in nostalgia. The wallpaper was peeling, the floors groaned under my feet, and yet, the mirrors were spotless, dozens of them, polished, gleaming, untouched by dust or time. There was one in particular, a large oval mirror in the main hallway. My grandmother used to call it the eye of the house, she said. It saw everything that ever happened here. I used to think it was just one of her creepy stories to keep me from running down the hall. But as I stood there now, looking into that glass, I saw something that froze the breath in my lungs. Behind me, deep in the reflection, there was a figure, tall, pale, standing in the doorway. My pulse surged. I turned around, but the hallway was empty. When I looked back, the figure was gone from the mirror to... For a moment, I stood there staring at my own reflection, convincing myself it had been a trick of the light. But deep inside I felt that same heavy air pressing down. The same awareness, watching from behind the glass. That night, I decided to stay. Maybe it was foolish, but curiosity always outweighed fear for me. I lit the old oil lamps, since the electricity was unreliable, and walked through each room, one by one. Everything felt suspended in time. Her sewing machine still sat near the window, a half-finished dress draped over it. A cup of tea rested on the table, long dried into a brown ring. It was as if she'd just stepped out and never returned. I stopped by her bedroom last, the door slightly ajar, the smell of lavender still lingering in the air. On her dresser were 3 small mirrors arranged in a triangle. My reflection looked back threefold, slightly delayed, slightly different. I leaned closer, studying each one. The middle reflection smiled. I didn't. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile, the one that didn't belong to me. I told myself it was imagination, that my mind was playing tricks after years away from this place. But the house had a pulse. It breathed in the dark. The old pipes moaned softly. The floors creaked without cause, and sometimes, just before dawn, I swore I could hear a whispering sound, like fingertips brushing against glass. I walked through the halls with a candle in hand, careful not to look too long into any of the mirrors. Every reflection felt heavier, more deliberate, as if they were waiting for me to acknowledge them. At one point, I thought I heard my name, soft, drawn out. I froze in the middle of the hallway, holding my breath. Elias. The voice was old, brittle, almost tender. My grandmother's. I spun around, but there was no one there, only my reflection. Eyes wide, candle trembling in my hand. Morning light did little to calm me. The house was quieter, yes, but the mirrors glistened unnaturally bright, as though they were alive beneath the sunlight. I decided to check the attic a place I had avoided as a child because my grandmother forbade it. That room is for the mirrors, she once said. They rest there. At the time, I thought she was joking, but when I climbed the stairs and opened the heavy attic door, I understood what she meant. The entire space was filled with mirrors, dozens of them, stacked, leaning, some covered with white cloths, others uncovered and gleaming like still water. It was suffocating. I stepped carefully between them, trying not to meet my own gaze. But as I passed one covered mirror, I heard the faint sound of breathing, not mine, slow and steady, coming from behind the cloth. I hesitated, hand trembling, then pulled it away. My reflection was there, of course, pale, wide-eyed, frightened. But behind it, in the depths of the glass, something else stirred. A shadow, faint but undeniable, moving independently of me. I stumbled back, my shoulder hitting another mirror, sending it clattering to the floor. The sound shattered the silence, and for a split second, every reflection in the attic flickered. I swear I saw faces, dozens of them pressed against the glass from the inside. Men, women, children, some weeping, some smiling, some with eyes completely black. When the trembling stopped, I stood there in shock, surrounded by broken glass, the candlelight flickering across 1,000 warped reflections. That's when I noticed something else. In the mirror I had uncovered, my reflection wasn't there anymore. The space where I should have been was empty. Just the room and the faint outline of a doorway behind me. Panic overtook reason. I ran down the stairs, barely remembering where my feet landed. The mirrors along the hallway seemed to shimmer as I passed, like water disturbed by an invisible hand. I didn't look into them. I couldn't. When I reached the living room, I collapsed into the old armchair, breathing hard, trying to steady myself. I told myself I was losing it, that grief and exhaustion were twisting my mind. But then I saw something impossible. Across the room, in that great oval mirror my grandmother called the eye of the house, my reflection was standing, but I was sitting. It watched me with a calm expression, head slightly tilted, like it was studying me. Then, slowly, it lifted a hand and placed it against the inside of the glass. The gesture was so gentle, almost compassionate. For a moment, I thought it wanted to comfort me, but then the fingers began to drag across the surface, leaving streaks that looked unmistakably like scratches. And I realized the handprints were on the inside. Morning came again, but the air inside the house was stale, unmoving, as if the walls were holding their breath. I avoided looking at the mirrors entirely. I couldn't stand the thought of seeing something that wasn't me staring back. Instead, I focused on cleaning, convincing myself that keeping busy would help me think clearly. Dusting shelves, folding blankets, rearranging furniture, anything to distract myself from the growing feeling that I wasn't alone. When I reached the library, a small room filled with old books and wooden cabinets, I noticed something odd. The large mirror that once hung above the fireplace was gone. In its place was a faded square mark on the wall where the frame had been. I didn't remember moving it, and I was sure I hadn't seen it in the attic. Curious, I opened one of the drawers beneath the fireplace, and there, under a pile of yellowed papers, was a leather-bound book. My grandmother's handwriting marked the first page. The light between reflections. The entries began decades ago. Most of them were written in the same calm, deliberate script she always used. Though the tone changed over time, she wrote about light glass and energy, about how mirrors weren't just tools for vanity, but windows to the other side. She believed that each reflection was a barrier, and that when a person looked long enough, their soul left traces, echoes that lingered just beyond sight. One passage chilled me. They watch us through the silver, learning our gestures. When the body dies, the echo waits until someone looks long enough to invite it through. I read that line again and again, my stomach tightening with every word. My grandmother had always been fascinated by the idea of spirits, but this was different. This wasn't belief. It was obsession. The last few pages were written in a shaky hand, as if she'd been terrified while writing them. I have seen her, the one who moves when I do not. The reflection is no longer mine. I closed the book, my hands trembling. The smell of dust and old perfume seemed to thicken in the air. Somewhere behind me, glass creaked softly, like a sigh. I turned slowly toward the doorway. The mirror from the fireplace, the one that had been missing, was there, leaning against the wall. I hadn't heard it being moved, hadn't noticed it before, but now, it stood perfectly upright, angled so that it reflected only me. I took a hesitant step closer, drawn by something I couldn't explain. My reflection looked normal at first, tired, pale, sleepless. But as I studied it, I saw faint movements that weren't mine. My reflection's chest didn't rise when I breathed. Its lips curved slightly when mine did not. Then, behind it, I noticed a shadow. It wasn't in the room, only in the glass, tall and thin, with a head tilted to the side like a curious bird. I stepped back, but the shadow didn't vanish. It grew clearer, closer, until it was standing just behind my reflection, whispering something into its ear. I couldn't hear what it said, but my reflection began to smile wider. Teeth too white, too many. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair, and when I looked again, the mirror was empty. My reflection was gone. I ran to the hallway, my pulse pounding. Every mirror I passed now showed something slightly off. In one, my eyes were black. In another, my mouth was open, frozen mid-scream. The further I went, the more they changed, until finally, at the end of the hall, I saw my grandmother's bedroom door open, just a crack. Her voice, faint, fragile, drifted through. "Elias, don't let them out." My heart stopped. I pushed the door open. The 3 mirrors on her dresser were uncovered, their surfaces gleaming unnaturally. For a brief moment, I saw her sitting on the bed, hands folded neatly on her lap, her eyes reflecting the lamplight. But then the image shimmered and dissolved. The bed was empty. The room was cold. The air itself seemed to hum, and as I turned to leave, all 3 mirrors began to shift. My reflection multiplied across their surfaces, each one slightly different, one smiling, one crying, one standing perfectly still while I moved. And then, all at once, they spoke in my voice. "You shouldn't have come back." I don't remember falling to the floor, but when I opened my eyes, I was staring up at the ceiling. My head throbbed, my throat was dry, and my vision blurred in and out of focus. The mirrors on the dresser stood silent again, reflecting only the dim glow of the hallway lamp. For a moment, I convinced myself I had dreamt everything. The whispering voices, the moving reflections, the shadow in the attic, it all seemed impossible. A feverish hallucination born from grief and sleeplessness. I stood slowly, trying to steady my breathing. The house was completely quiet. Too quiet. When I stepped into the hallway, the air felt different, colder, heavier, like a storm waiting to break. I decided I'd had enough. I would leave, go back to the city, sell the house, and never return. That was the plan. But as I walked toward the front door, I saw something that stopped me cold. The mirrors on the wall, all of them were blank. No reflection at all. Not the lamp, not the furniture, not even me. At first I thought it was just the lighting, but when I moved, they didn't. They stood still, like frozen pools of silver. My skin prickled. I stepped closer to one, waving a hand in front of it. Nothing. The surface rippled slightly, as though it were made of water, but it didn't reflect. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement not from the glass, but from inside it. A faint, shadowy figure pacing behind the surface. My heart pounded. I backed away, but the mirror pulsed again, and for the briefest moment, I saw my own reflection return. Only, it wasn't mimicking me anymore. It leaned forward, pressing its hands against the other side of the glass, its eyes wild with hunger. My reflection smiled, that same slow, a natural grin I'd seen before, and mouthed words I couldn't hear. Then the glass bulged outward, as if something was pushing from within. The surface shimmered, and a hand, pale, skeletal, pressed against it from the inside. I stumbled back, crashing into a table, sending a lamp shattering across the floor. The light flickered and died, plunging the hallway into half shadow. The hand pushed further, followed by a second, and then a face began to emerge. Mine, but wrong. Its skin shimmered like glass, its eyes hollow, its grin carved too deep. I turned to run, but every mirror in the house came alive at once. The sound, though I can't describe it fully, was like the tearing of fabric and the shattering of water all at once. Figures stepped forward from the glass, each one wearing my face, each one slightly distorted. Some taller, some thinner, some broken at odd angles. Their movements jerky and unnatural. I ran toward the front door, but it wouldn't open. My hand slipped on the handle, slick with sweat, as dozens of footsteps echoed behind me. Soft, deliberate, synchronized. I could feel their eyes on my back. When I turned, they had stopped just a few feet away. All of them stood perfectly still, lining the walls like silent mannequins. And then, one by one, they began to tilt their heads to the side, the same eerie motion, mirrored perfectly across the line. The air vibrated, the lights flickered, and I heard my grandmother's voice again, everywhere and nowhere at once. The house remembers. Elias, the mirrors never forget. The reflections stepped closer, and I saw that their mouths were moving in unison, whispering the same phrase over and over, something I couldn't understand. My knees buckled. My vision swam. I reached for the wall to steady myself and touched cold glass instead. I looked up. There was a mirror where the wall should have been. But this time, I saw something different inside. Not reflections. A room. The same hallway, empty, silent, waiting. And inside that mirrored world, one of the versions of me turned, smiled faintly, and reached out a hand, as if inviting me in. I don't remember what happened next. The last thing I felt was a sudden rush of air, as though the floor had disappeared beneath me. Then silence. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing upright, but everything looked wrong. The world shimmered faintly, like light passing through water. I looked around and saw the hallway, the furniture, the walls, all exactly as before, yet distant, hollow. And then I saw him, the real me, standing outside the mirror, staring back. He touched the glass curiously, tilting his head. I tried to scream, to call out, to warn him, but no sound came. My hands pressed against the inside of the mirror, and the truth hit me like a knife to the chest. I was the reflection now. He smiled my smile and turned away, leaving me behind. The house grew still. Dust floated through the air, settling on old wood and cold glass. In every mirror, faces watched quietly, waiting for the next person to look too long. The summer of 1986 in the small town of Ravenwood felt endless. The air shimmered with heat. Bicycles raced down cracked pavement, and the smell of cut grass mixed with the hum of distant lawnmowers. Inside his dimly lit bedroom, Leo, 15, sat surrounded by wires, cassette tapes, and an old ham radio that had belonged to his late father. The radio wasn't just a hobby, it was a lifeline. A connection to something beyond the walls of that house, beyond the silence that had followed his father's death. Most nights, Leo tuned into truckers, distant weather stations, or static-laced broadcasts from foreign voices he didn't understand. But that night, something was different. The static felt alive. A faint whisper bled through the speakers, buried deep in the noise. "Do you hear me?" Leo froze. It wasn't a normal transmission. The voice sounded too close, too deliberate, too human. It had the fragile pitch of a young girl, but hollow, like someone speaking from underwater. He leaned closer, turning the dial with trembling fingers. "Who is this?" he asked, half expecting a prank from his friends. Static. Then, a low click, like someone switching channels, and the voice returned, softer this time. "You have to listen. Before she wakes up." A chill rippled up his spine. The signal meter flickered erratically, bouncing between frequencies that shouldn't even exist. Leo pressed the record button on his cassette deck, his pulse hammering. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, the voice was gone. Silence swallowed the room. He replayed the tape, nothing but static. No voice, no distortion. Just the hiss of emptiness. Leo sat back, staring at the glowing red dial. For the first time, the familiar comfort of the radio felt wrong, like it was watching him. The next morning, he met Clara, his best friend since childhood, outside the corner store. Clara was all sarcasm and sharp eyes, her backpack covered in pins from bands she didn't actually like. When Leo told her about the voice, she laughed, sipping her soda. "Maybe you tuned in to Ghostbusters FM," she joked. "I'm serious," he insisted. "It said something about waking up, and it knew I was there." Clara shrugged. "Then record it again tonight. If it's real, it'll come back." Her teasing grin didn't calm him, because when Leo rewound the tape again later that day, the static wasn't just random anymore. There was a faint rhythm buried inside it, a pattern. 3 short bursts, 2 long, 3 short again, almost like a heartbeat. That night, Leo returned to his desk with the lights off and his window open. The cicadas outside screamed in the heavy summer air. He turned the radio knob slowly, tracing the same frequency range as before. At first, nothing but the usual white noise. Then, the faint echo of something mechanical, a tone, rising and falling, like a breathing machine. Leo's hand hovered over the recorder. "Do you hear me?" he whispered into the mic. The reply came instantly this time. "Yes." The word was drawn out, distorted, almost mechanical. Then came another sentence, sharper, almost pleading. "Don't let her find you." Leo's breath caught. "Who are you talking about?" But before the voice could answer, the power flickered. The radio hissed, the lights blinked off, and for a split second, Leo saw a figure reflected in the glass of the window. Not outside. Behind him. He spun around, but the room was empty. Only the faint glow of the radio illuminated his desk. The static was back to normal, indifferent, endless. Leo sat there, heart pounding, as the hum of electricity filled the silence. He could still hear the faint echo of that last word. He reached out to turn off the radio. But before his hand touched the dial, a small red light blinked on by itself. A new transmission started, but this time, it wasn't coming to him. The display showed an outgoing signal. His own radio was transmitting, and from the speaker, in his own voice, came the words, "She's already awake." The following days bled together in a haze of heat and unease. Ravenwood was quiet, too quiet. Even the usual hum of lawnmowers and barking dogs seemed muted, as if the whole town was holding its breath. Leo tried to ignore the voice, but the silence of his room kept dragging him back to the radio. He replayed the tape over and over, convinced that somewhere inside the static there was a pattern, something coded, something intentional. By the 3rd day he noticed it. The rhythm wasn't random. It repeated every 23 seconds, perfectly. And each time it played, the lights in his room flickered. Not once, not twice, 3 times. He wrote it all down in his notebook, marking each flicker with a shaky hand. 3 lights, 23 seconds, every hour. It couldn't be a coincidence. The transmission wasn't just reaching him, it was syncing with something electrical, something alive. That night, Leo went to Clara's house with his cassette player. She rolled her eyes but followed him into the garage, where they plugged the radio into a larger speaker. The air was hot and heavy, the fluorescent bulb above them buzzing faintly. Leo hit play. Static filled the room like a cloud of invisible dust. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the flicker. The light above them blinked 3 times. Clara froze, her smirk fading. "Okay, that's creepy," she admitted. Leo nodded, swallowing hard. "Told you." But it wasn't just the flickering light that frightened them. Beneath the static, something new began to emerge. A low hum, like machinery deep underground. The sound pulsed, rhythmic, mechanical, almost biological. Leo turned the dial, and the hum grew louder, vibrating through the concrete floor of the garage. Clara stumbled back. "Turn it off, Leo, seriously." But Leo couldn't. His eyes were fixed on the red needle bouncing on the dial. The hum shifted, became voices. Dozens of them, whispering at once, overlapping like a chorus of distorted recordings. "Help. Trapped. Listen. Wake her." Clara slapped the power switch, plunging the room into silence. The two of them stood there, breathing hard. The bulb overhead glowed faintly before popping with a sharp snap. Glass sprinkled the floor like rain. The next morning, the radio station tower on the outskirts of Ravenwood collapsed. The news said it was a lightning strike, but there hadn't been a storm in weeks. A worker at the local power plant was found unconscious near the control panel, muttering the same phrase over and over. "She's awake now." No one in town knew what it meant, but Leo did. It was the same thing the voice had said through his radio. He didn't tell Clara, but she noticed the change in him. The hollow eyes, the sleeplessness, the way he jumped at every noise. When she pressed him, he finally confessed. "It's not just a signal," he whispered. "It's coming from somewhere under the town, and it's getting closer." They decided to investigate that night. Armed with flashlights, they followed the old drainage, tunnels that ran beneath the neighborhood, a maze of concrete and shadows that smelled of rust and mold. Leo carried the radio, its small red light blinking like a heartbeat in the dark. At first, only silence. Then, faintly, the hum returned. It echoed through the tunnels, bouncing off the wet walls. They followed it to a section where the concrete was cracked, the rebar exposed like veins. The signal peaked there, screaming through the speaker. Leo crouched, brushing dirt aside, and saw a symbol carved into the floor. A circle with 3 jagged lines crossing through it. Clara whispered, "What the hell is that?" Leo didn't answer. The radio was shaking in his hands, the static rising into a shrill frequency that made his ears ring. Then the voice, not the girl's this time, a deeper one. "You shouldn't have followed it." They bolted. The sound of their footsteps echoed like thunder through the tunnels, chased by that mechanical hum. When they burst back into the open air, the sky above Ravenwood was flickering, not lightning, but power surges across the entire grid. Streetlights blinked 3 times, perfectly synchronized. Leo stared, realizing it wasn't just his radio anymore. Whatever was coming through the frequency was spreading, using every electrical line, every circuit, every signal. It was already in the town's veins. For 2 days, Ravenwood trembled under strange electrical surges. Power flickered across entire blocks, clocks reset themselves, and phones rang with no one on the other end. The local radio stations were the first to go silent. Every channel, no matter the frequency, emitted the same background hum, a slow mechanical breathing, pulsing exactly every 23 seconds. Leo barely left his room. He'd set up the ham radio again, unable to resist. Clara had begged him to stop, to throw it away, but he couldn't. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was compulsion, like something was whispering just below his thoughts, pushing him to keep listening. The whispers had changed. They no longer sounded like random static. They had rhythm, direction, intention. Late that night, Leo sat alone, eyes fixed on the red glow of the frequency meter. The air was heavy, humming with invisible tension. And then, at exactly midnight, the transmission returned. Leo, his own name, whispered in the same tone the girl's voice had used. "Who are you?" he whispered back. Static answered first, then another voice deeper, colder, impossible to place. "You opened the way." Leo's throat tightened. The dials spun by themselves, clicking between frequencies faster than he could follow. The lights flickered 3 times, and the air temperature dropped so sharply his breath turned visible. "We hear you now," the voice said. He slammed the power switch off, but even with the radio dead, He could still hear the voice faint, somewhere behind him, as if the sound had escaped the machine. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Clara found him sitting on the curb outside his house, pale, shaking, the radio beside him. He told her what had happened, every detail. She tried to brush it off, but something about the way the air seemed to hum around them made her skin crawl. "We need help," she said. "Maybe your dad's old equipment is doing something weird. Maybe it's broken." But Leo shook his head. "It's not broken. It's listening." He told her about the symbol in the tunnels, the circle with 3 jagged lines. Clara had seen it before too, spray painted on the side of the abandoned substation near the river. It wasn't just graffiti. It had been carved into metal. Someone or something had marked the town long before them. That evening, they biked to the substation, the sun bleeding red behind the rooftops. The chain-link fence was torn open, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and rot. Inside, rows of dead monitors lined the walls, flickering with faint static. The hum was louder here, deep and guttural, vibrating through the floor. Leo turned the radio on again. The signal spiked instantly, and then the screens began to flicker in unison. Faces appeared, human shapes, distorted by static, screaming silently from behind the glass. Clara gasped, stumbling backward. "Leo, turn it off." But Leo was frozen. The whispers poured through the speakers, overlapping, desperate. "Help us. Wake her. She's feeding." Suddenly, the power surged. Every screen burst into blinding white light, and a deafening tone filled the room. Clara yanked the plug from the wall, plunging them into darkness. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the radio clicked back on by itself. The voice that followed wasn't like before. It was layered, hundreds of tones, speaking together as one. "You shouldn't have come here." The walls began to hum, vibrating with impossible force. The symbol, the circle with 3 jagged lines, glowed faintly on the concrete floor beneath their feet. Leo dropped the radio, which sparked violently, the smell of burnt plastic filling the air. The ground split open in a thin, jagged line, light spilling out from below, cold, white, and pulsating. Clara screamed his name as the sound rose higher, shaking the entire building. Leo could feel it, the frequency, not just in his ears, but in his bones. It wasn't sound anymore. It was something alive. They ran, through the broken gate, across the gravel road, until the substation was nothing but a flickering light behind them. But even as they reached the safety of the street, Leo realized something terrible. The radio, the one he'd dropped, was still transmitting. He could hear it faintly, from inside his backpack, though it had never been put there, and the voice now spoke clearly, with terrifying calm. "You can't turn it off, Leo. It's part of you now." The morning after the substation incident, Ravenwood changed. The air carried a low hum that never stopped, faint, but constant, like a hidden generator beneath the town. People started complaining about headaches, flickering lights, dreams filled with static and whispers. Radios turned on in the middle of the night. Televisions glowed with dead channels, showing faint, shifting silhouettes. The town's power grid was shut down, but the lights never went dark. Something else was feeding them now. Leo stayed locked in his room, refusing to answer calls. His notebook filled with sketches of the symbol and endless pages of numbers. He didn't remember writing most of them. Sometimes, when he looked at the handwriting, it didn't even look like his. Clara was the only one who kept visiting. She found him pale, exhausted, surrounded by wires and broken circuits. The radio was back, repaired somehow, though neither of them had touched it. The red light blinked steadily, like a heartbeat. Leo told her the truth he'd been avoiding. "It's not a signal," he said, voice shaking. "It's a door, and every time we listen, it opens a little wider." He pointed to the symbols drawn across his walls. Each one pulsed faintly in the dim light, as if responding to his words. "They're using the frequencies, radio waves, electricity, anything with current. They're not from here, Clara. They're underneath everything. The hum is them." She wanted to believe he was losing his mind, but the air itself seemed to vibrate with meaning. Something unseen was listening, watching. That night, Clara woke to the sound of her TV turning on by itself. The screen glowed with static. Through the hiss, she could hear voices, hundreds of them, whispering over one another. Then one rose above the rest, clear and cold. "You can't stop the broadcast." She ran to Leo's house, finding the door open, the hall lights flickering in that familiar pattern. 3 flashes. Pause, 3 again. In his room, Leo sat facing the radio, unmoving. The light on the device was glowing white now, brighter than it should have been. "Leo," she whispered. He turned slowly toward her. His eyes reflected the same pale light, and when he spoke, his voice echoed, layered, not entirely human. "It's almost time, Clara. They're ready." Behind him, the walls began to pulse, every drawn symbol burning red. The radio screamed a piercing, metallic sound that drilled through her skull. Clara fell to her knees, clutching her ears. And then, just as suddenly, silence. When she looked up, Leo was gone. Only the radio remained, still humming. She grabbed it and ran, stumbling out into the street. But Ravenwood wasn't the same anymore. The town was dark, yet alive. Street lights flickered in patterns. Storefront signs buzzed with symbols instead of words, and faint whispers rose from every speaker and wire. In the distance, she saw people standing perfectly still under the glowing lamps, faces turned upward, eyes blank and white. The static filled the night like a storm. Clara pressed the radio to her chest, shaking. "What do you want?" she cried. The answer came from everywhere at once, from the power lines, from the open windows, from the air itself. To be heard. The ground beneath her feet trembled. The street cracked open, light spilling from below, that same cold, mechanical brightness she'd seen in the tunnels. The hum rose into a roar. Clara screamed Leo's name, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Every screen in town lit up, every radio turned on, every wire glowing as something pushed its way through the signal. A shape, faceless and shifting, built of static and light. The entity moved like smoke, like interference, its form fracturing the air. It wasn't stepping into their world, it was rewriting it. Everything that relied on power or sound bent toward it, consumed by the frequency. The next morning, Ravenwood was silent. The power grid was dead. The air no longer hummed. When government agents arrived, they found the town empty, every house abandoned, every piece of technology fried beyond repair. Only one recording was recovered from a radio tower miles away, still transmitting faintly through the static. A female voice, trembling, desperate, repeating the same words over and over. "This is Clara. If anyone can hear me, don't tune in. Don't listen to the hum. It's not noise. It's them." Then silence. And somewhere in that static, if you turn the volume high enough, you can still hear Leo's voice whispering, "She's awake."